Hello and welcome back to another Doctor Who action figure review on the Host Productions. In today's review, you guessed it, we're going to be taking a look at more classic series Daleks from the B&M exclusive History of the Daleks collector figure series. In today's review in particular, two Genesis Daleks from the highly popular 1975 4th Doctor story, Genesis of the Daleks. So taking a look at the packaging for History of the Daleks set 11, for those of you that have seen my previous reviews of the last wave's History of the Daleks sets, you will know I absolutely despise the variations which have been made to the packaging for this series. So at the very bottom it states that this is the 11th set within the series. I can't believe that we've had 11 sets already, time has gone incredibly quick. And then we have the usual B&M exclusive limited edition sticker. And at the very bottom we have the character options logo as well as stating the title of the story that these two Daleks come from. In the top corner we have the stacked variation of the Doctor Who logo. And then to accompany this we have the TARDIS graphic which also extends along to the side of the box. At the very top we have the same details repeated as well as a lot of plastic stickers holding the packaging in place, and then at the very bottom we have the inclusion of the company information. Flipping around to the back of the packaging now, we have exactly the same information to usual. As always, I really like the amount of text that we get to see on the back of these collector sets, presenting both a story synopsis for the TV serial, but also a little bit of behind the scenes about the Dalek props themselves. Much like my reviews of the previous History of the Daleks collector sets from the previous wave, I'm going to use this piece of footage for both reviews of sets 11 and 12 to discuss the packaging amendments. So to make the packaging recyclable, character options have basically limited the amount of plastic that is used within the box to one piece, which holds both of the Daleks in place. Appearance-wise, I really don't think this looks the best. It makes it rather difficult to spot various issues with the Daleks and purchasing it in store, but also it makes the product, in my opinion, seem quite cheap looking. Everything about these sets since the very beginning seemed to be suggesting that these were aimed towards the collector's market, but with the introduction of this packaging, I think that has kind of declined in my opinion, because we now don't have that personalised background which is featured in each and every set to make each set unique and exciting and personal to the story. Now it's just a standardised white background, making each set feel not as special. Those of you who like to take their figures out of the box and then put them back in again for display, you are not able to do that with these sets. Once the Daleks are out of the box, they are out for good and the packaging will never be intact again. So who knows, it might be a grand plan to try and get collectors to purchase two. However, it's just really inconvenient, sadly, and again, I feel like it detracts from the overall quality of the product. Choices the likes of this, but also the god-awful packaging which came with the First Doctor and TARDIS set, which is really making me question if I do actually want to continue collecting this series, which really says something given that this is a line that I've loved collecting since literally 2006. It's just a shame, I feel like it is living in the shadows of what this series used to be. One of the main notable changes for these 2022 Genesis Daleks is the revision in colour palette to the main body paintwork. Now this is something that has seen a number of variations over the history of the classic series action figure line, which I have done a whole series about, so check that out if you're interested to find out more. But I really do love this new design. It's kind of a combination of what we've seen in the past, but also the paint application techniques seen within the B&M exclusive series. This is one of those situations where I don't necessarily like these Daleks more or less than the original Forbidden Planet exclusive releases. I think that they all look superb alongside each other, and I like the various different paint applications that we've seen. It showcases the variety of the Dalek props within classic Doctor Who, especially when you get to episodes the likes of Destiny of the Daleks, where the props are basically falling apart. Sculpt of which that I do believe will be utilised for the vast majority of Daleks moving forward. We have the two-stack fender that is slightly staggered towards the top. Now this has been sculpted in your usual sort of dark matte black plastic, but what we do have is this stunning wash which has been applied over the top, a silver wash which is kind of scraped across the entirety of the Dalek fender, and I absolutely love this. It's something of which that was initially featured on the earlier sets within this series, and then kind of towards the midpoint of the 60s sets it unfortunately started to fade away, and I'm really happy to see this return because overall it gives the product generally a more authentic and realistic appearance. It looks like a representation of the actual prop rather than a Dalek toy. Moving over to the second Dalek within the set, the wash that is applied across the two fenders does certainly vary, so I would say on this Dalek here it is a lot more prominent, and then bringing in this Dalek once again, I think to some extent it is a rather subtle design. So again, I like the fact that this varies because it creates a rather unique character for both of the Dalek props. As with all Dalek releases, of course towards the bottom we have the inclusion of the rotating wheel and the two back wheels. Moving up now to the Dalek skirt, this is of course a sculpt that we have grown very familiar with. I think it is a great example actually of how the paint application on this wave seems to be far superior compared to some of the previous releases, in particular with reference to the last wave, which seemed to be a little bit all over the place. So here we have a continuation of that lovely paintwork. I do love the way that the light bounces off this glossy black. It really does make the Dalek shine. If I was to be really picky, which I don't really want to be because I do like these Daleks and this review is going to feature lots of compliments, we do have this seam here running up the middle, and the same can be said for the front as well, where I think it's not particularly too disguised. I think it's certainly a lot more visible compared to some of the other Dalek releases, so it may be nice just to see that tightened up a bit. Like some of the previous Dalek releases, I really do think the glossy black actually sticks within the intended sculpting lines, which makes the Dalek look far superior to some of the previous releases. Skirt and hemispheres for both of the Daleks featured within this set are basically identical, making this set lovely and uniform, excellent for army building. We move up to the Dalek midsection now. It will be no surprise to say that this is exactly the same sculpt to usual, and overall from paint application it is basically the same across both of the Daleks released within this set, so a really lovely shiny design, although there are a few notable changes. But firstly, looking at the Genesis Dalek, which sports the Mini Cooper dome lights in between the weaponry section, this area is simply just blank. Swapping this out for the Dalek with the new dome lights, we have the continuation of the usual design, but this time we have a circular section present in between the weaponry. It's worth noting that this circular section is also present on the Dalek, which features within the creation of the Daleks collector set alongside Davros. Again, this is one of those variant changes that in theory really didn't have to be done, but I'm really glad it has, simply for the sake of variety, and if you're someone who likes to army build, this set is absolutely ideal. So taking a closer look at the rest of the Dalek midsection now, we've all seen this so many times before. It is of course the usual sculpt with the mesh and the various slats. So in between the slats we have that lovely mesh texturing, and then of course each individual slat has two rivets at the top and bottom, which is very nice indeed. Since I absolutely love these Daleks and I've been giving lots of compliments within this review, I'm going to be picky and say it may have been nice to have a wash present over the top of this, just to make that mesh design stand out a little bit more. In fact, something very similar to what is seen on the fender would do the job nicely. It's a very minor critique, and I suppose something that you could do yourself if you are a fan of customization, but I think especially given that the vast majority of the Dalek body is the same colour, it would have really made this Dalek sculpt pop, but I'm okay without it. Variation in the ball joints of the weaponry sockets is perhaps one of the main things which sets these Daleks apart from one another, so starting off with the Mini Cooper dome light Dalek. This Dalek, both of the ball joints within the weaponry are in fact exactly the same colour. This is a solid black, and to be quite honest, it doesn't really stand out, especially when you have a rather dark colour utilised for the vast majority of the Dalek's main body. As for the Dalek with the new variation of dome light, the ball joint for the gun is virtually exactly the same in a black plastic, however the manipulator arm sports a light grey ball joint. Again, some may argue this is a very pointless and minor change, but what I like is once again we're kind of returning to the origins of the history of the Daleks series, where the Daleks presented within these sets are at least trying to replicate the various different models of Dalek prop that we actually seen within the show itself, very much like the first set within this series, which actually had the 1 and 2 markings on the back of the Dalek model itself. Surprise surprise, the Dalek manipulator arm is exactly the same sculpt to usual, so we have that silver rod in the very centre, which does of course become ever so slightly smaller just before the plunger itself, and the plunger has been given a matte black paint application. As for the Dalek gun, this is exactly the same for both of the Daleks presented within this set, and it's been given a glossy black finish. As per usual, we have the various rods running up the main section, along with the main shooty bit at the very end. Now, for those of you that have seen my previous reviews of Last Wave's History of the Daleks collector sets, you will know that I was really frustrated by the fact that the Death to the Daleks had incredibly flexible appendages, to the extent that I didn't really want to move the manipulator arm and gun from the fear of it basically snapping. They were that flexible, and I'm so happy to see that with this wave, all of the Daleks that have been released have now reverted back to what appears to be a very sturdy plastic being used across all three of the appendages, meaning that they can now move without the fear of them being snapped. Instantly, the Dalek feels like it is a higher quality, and something of which that I actually want to own. Moving further up the Dalek now, we have the inclusion of the neck bin, and I will be very surprised if there is anyone watching this review who hasn't seen this sculpt before, let alone actually have it within their collection, because it has been released basically on every single classic Dalek that we have seen now for the past decade. But mesh style texturing, which does of course have various gratings within it. I really do like the way how we have the various pillars. These do line up rather neatly. I've noticed with these Daleks that there is various scratches and little dents within the sculpt itself, so if you get the opportunity to do so, I definitely recommend going into store and actually purchasing these Daleks in hand to ensure that you get a Dalek with good quality control. So for example, mine has a little dent there on the side of the neck bin. Finally now, for both of these Daleks, let's move up to the dome, which does sport a number of variations, making these Daleks different to the previous Genesis releases. Of course, the dome itself is exactly the same sculpt to usual, so nothing to talk about there, but what I would like to mention is the way that the paint application really makes the light bounce off the top of the dome of the Dalek. It gives the Dalek an overall very glossy, shiny finish. The most distinguishing features which sets both of the Daleks apart within this set is the use of dome light. So taking a look at Dalek 1, we have the inclusion of the usual Mini Cooper dome light, which did of course originate from the Forbidden Planet exclusive series. As per usual, this has that lovely ridged finish, and we also have that white frosting applied over the top to really make it stand out. It does in fact replicate exactly the same finish to the Dalek as seen within the creation of the Daleks collector set, as well as being rather familiar to some of the other Daleks that we have seen released in the past. The second Dalek of the set, however, is where things get a little bit exciting, as we have the debut of a brand new dome light sculpt, which I do believe will be included in a number of the upcoming History of the Daleks collector sets. Again, this is lovely for variety. I'll be honest, despite the fact that this is a brand new sculpt, I think that most normal Doctor Who fans probably won't even notice this has been changed, because it does virtually look like any other Dalek dome light, just with a subtle alteration. Dome light itself is a rather familiar shape, being rather curved in the very centre, but the big difference is the fact that we now have this flatter section running around the side, kind of creating a rim. The entirety of this has been sculpted in a transparent plastic, but it kind of has a milky finish to it. This brand new dome light sculpt is also utilised within the accompanying Destiny of the Daleks collector set, arguably in a much nicer fashion, and it stands out a lot more because we have that black rim surrounding the dome light itself, making it stand out, but its usage within this set is still nice. Again, good for variety for those people that have been collecting this series for a number of years. Something that I have noticed with this wave of Dalek releases is that generally they just seem to be a lot more detailed and a lot more precise. I feel like care and attention has gone into these Daleks to make them look as accurate as possible, which is something that I think definitely slipped with some of the previous releases, certainly within the last wave. That can be particularly seen here at the eye stalk, where we have various different colours used. Both of the Daleks, we have the very base of the eye stalk itself, which basically continues the body colour for the Dalek, which I think is quite a nice touch, and then just above this we have a lovely sharp silver highlight. The separated spaced disc design has been used here, picked out with a lovely lighter blue highlight. Per usual, the tip of the eye stalk has been given that lovely glossy black finish, really complemented with that vibrant white paint application. Definitely recommend going into store in order to avoid paint leak around this area. There we have it, that is my review of the B&M exclusive History of the Daleks Set 11. Again, another excellent addition to the collection, and I'm so relieved to say that both of the History of the Daleks sets released as a part of the later 2022 wave are a vast improvement upon some of the previous sets that we've had in this series in more recent years. Again, care and attention seems to have gone into these Daleks to make them something special, highly detailed, but also something that is different from their original counterpart shots from the Forbidden Planet exclusive series. I love the overall finish to the Dalek and the colour palette which has been used, but also the paint application generally seems a lot sharper compared to some of the previous releases. The highlights for me is that overall new upgrade to the colour palette, but also the reintroduction of that wash on the fender. It's also really lovely to see the introduction of a brand new dome light, which although is new for this collector set, I think is certainly used a lot better within the Destiny set, but that isn't this Dalek's fault, it generally just stands out a lot more on the other release. I do very much get the sense that I'm almost preaching to the converted when it comes to these collector sets. I'm not particularly needing to persuade you to buy these products. I think that if you've been purchasing them since the very beginning, then you're probably just going to be buying these sets anyway out of obligation, but what I will say is I'm so relieved to see a return to higher quality. So regardless of the incredibly crap box, I really hope that the detail at this level continues in the future waves. But as always with these Daleks, you know what you're getting. It's more Daleks that are painted ever so slightly differently to last time. So thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for regular Doctor Who content. Have a nice day. I shall see you all next time.